What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Big Blue in the Bronx live edition podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. It's been a little while since we've been live, but hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate you coming back. Share this out. Again, do all the good stuff. Tomorrow, we got the New York Giants hosting the Detroit Lions. We had two joint practices this week, very eventful ones. But, of course, I have to introduce my honorary guest for tonight, Mr. Will Rock of the Rocked On Podcast Network, who will give us his take on the joint practices, players to watch, and all that sort of good details from the side of the Detroit Lions. But first, Will, I got to get your first thoughts. How's it going, man?
It's going well. A few days under the weather, but I couldn't miss this, man. I appreciate you having me on, Alex. This is truly an honor. So blessed to be here with you guys and talk some Lions Giants football, man. Let's get it on.
Yeah, definitely. So again, what's up to everybody in the chat? What's up to Trace, a Lions fan in the chat? He says, "Hey, Will."
Yeah, we'll have some Lions fans in here tonight. I promise you.
Cool. I love the diversity. Love the diversity. Get both sides of the aisle. So I will just go into joint practices first because that was like the main thing, obviously. And let's pull the elephant out of the room. There were a lot of scrums. There were a lot of fights these last 2 days. Now, I'll put in my little 2 cents as far as the way things went. Last year, now, of course, I didn't go last year to the joint practices. I only heard it from Giants content creators and some Lions beat writers. Basically, the Giants got manhandled. I think it was either 1 or 2 days of practice. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was 1, but again, I could be wrong. The Giants pretty much got manhandled. Their offensive line wasn't good. Daniel Jones was throwing interceptions left and right. And then this year, in my opinion, things sort of changed where the Giants turned around and said, we're not going to get our ass beat in our own facility, and we're not going to get beat by the Lions the second year in a row. And I think coming in, Giant fans already knew that the Lions run some really intense practices, and I applaud that because, I mean, I don't hate the Lions. I actually like them as a team. You know, a couple of years ago, they were really bad, and then they're starting to come up now. How do you take the fighting? Because I've seen people say, oh, it's bad. And then you got people say, oh, it's just prepping for the regular season. What is your take, Will, on the scrums that we saw between day 1 and day 2?
I mean, to be honest with you, I think that I'm in line with Dan Campbell. And I mean, a lot of the coaches, they view it as unnecessary because it's hindering the bigger purpose here, which is to get, a lot on tape, to have some good quality interaction with another team, right? To kind of test your mettle, so to speak, because you're not playing in a game on Thursday. Your starters won't be playing. But at the same time, I mean, some of the stuff is expected. I mean, you've been amped up since spring. You're ready to get back to it. The Lions are coming off of an NFC, championship loss. I mean, they're feeling it. They just want to get after everybody. And the Giants, you're right. I mean, they had every right to be ticked off. I mean, the Lions did go in and they kind of had their way with them last year. And the Giants are an up-and-coming team. And, Malik Neighbors is that guy. So, he wanted it to be known. He was burning the Lions there for a minute, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that. So, obviously, the stress was there. The heat of the day was on, and tempers flared, and it is what it is. 10, 12 fights, yeah, it's probably a bit too much. You'd like to see, tempers kind of stay even a little bit. You're going to have a few, but I guess my overall take is it's going to happen. I mean, it's bound to happen. It's the first practice they've been with another team. But the second day, I think we've seen what it should have been the first day. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Troy, what's up to Rick in the chat? Troy also says, what's up, my neighbor Will? Did you lose power yesterday? Was there some sort of a storm or something?
I did not. We had some crazy storms. We've had a lot of crazy weather here this summer. A lot more big storms that we don't normally have. But I wasn't online yesterday, so I wouldn't have known anyway.
Yeah. All right. So getting into some of the meat and potatoes of the joint practices and all that sort of stuff. One guy that stood out to me, I guess, and I'll also talk about my Giants takeaways. And I was going to go into it once we get to the questionnaire, but we talked a little bit beforehand about this particular player, Jameson Williams. Now, I think it was day 1 more or so he flashed. He beat Cordell Flott wide open for a touchdown. Then there was a miscommunication in the secondary when they were doing red zone drills at the end. not much to say on that second day. It was more the attention put to the running backs for the Lions offense from what I saw. What are your thoughts on JMO? Because I know there's probably a split in the Lions fan base. Does he need to step up? What are your thoughts on him? And what
So, I mean, if you want to go all in on JMO, here's what I would say about the joint practice. It was good to see him get active. I mean, I've seen a ton of plays where he was getting beyond whoever was guarding him and making a lot of good plays. Right, finally catching the ball. Not a lot of balls on the ground for JMO this season, but to see him do it against another team is something that we needed to see. He started to flash last season, and he had flashes the season before, albeit, very short time in the NFL, his first season due to injury. We need consistency out of JMO. And I think that there is a divide within the Lions fan base, and I'm kind of on both sides of it. I've been a staunch, I guess, hater, if you will, against JMO because I still support him, but I haven't seen it, right? I haven't seen him do it with any consistency yet, and it's worrisome. So this is season 3, and I would be lying, if I told you that I always felt like JMO, was going to arrive and finally put it all together. I mean, I've had my doubts, but this is the key, I think, for JMO this year, and I think that this is where people like myself, who've kind of been in that boat of he's not going to get it done, are starting to change their tune a little bit. He finally grew up. Like he had a moment of clarity where he even said it to the media that he's grown mentally. Obviously, physically, he's changed his body this offseason. But he made some key statements this offseason that his work with Teddy B was so much more important than just playing football. It was finally recognizing what he needed to do to become a solid teammate first and foremost. It wasn't just himself anymore. It was, how can I help my teammates grow? How can I be part of their solution, their plan, the team plan, win ball games? It's not about my stat line anymore. And I think that was the biggest hurdle for JMO, was getting beyond the stat line, right? And how he can be a successful NFL wide receiver on a team that wants to win as a team. So now comes 2024. And you're starting to see some of that consistency arrive, each day, each OTA, each mini camp, each practice, now training camp, and now against the Giants, he's showing the consistency. So he's starting to show up. He's had a handful of nice plays, the last few days. Jared Goff has more confidence in JMO than ever before, and it shows. He's not just hitting him on the fourth option or the third option. It's the first option or the second option now. He's targeting more on shorter routes, which is something that we haven't seen JMO succeed in because his route tree was pathetic, to be honest with you. It was either go route, deep route, or a deep crosser, and that was about it. Now we're starting to see him on some of these shorter intermediate routes where he's having success. So to shorten this take up, I guess this is a make or break season for JMO. That's what it really is. Being a 12th overall pick, it's time to show up. It's time to show us all why Brad Holmes risked so much to move up to take him and what he's seen in him. So that's my point. I guess that's my take on JMO.
Yeah, definitely. So getting into a little bit of the defensive side, and I'll start from the Giants' offensive side. And I always said this on day 1, and I said this on day 2 of the joint practices. It was so stupid because you had the Giants. This is the way it was structured. You had the Giants indoor facility, which was the furthest thing away from the fans around the facility and the bleachers. Then you had one field. Then you had another field, which was the closest thing to the bleachers. And then you had a diagonal, like straight line field right next to the both fields. Now, what the Giants could have done, and I don't know if this had anything to do with the Lions, I'll blame the Giants because they're the home squad, is they could have put one team on that. It's kind of like a perpendicular thing. They could have put one team on this field and another team on this field. But instead, what they did is they put the Giants offense on the furthest field away to where the media was the only group of spectators that could see them. But my complaints, everybody else's, all that sort of stuff. One of the biggest standouts, to no one's surprise, really, and of course, my expectations for the Giants are very dim compared to many others, but Malik Neighbors has completely taken the title for one of the best standouts or the best standout in Giants training camp thus far. He was catching every pass from Daniel Jones yesterday. In training camp, he's been a monster. I love the way he has pretty much transformed this offense because he's been one of the top guys. And if he's not in there, the offense kind of struggles a little bit, which is a little worrisome because there are plays that Malik Neighbors will not be in there. But looking at this from a defensive perspective, I did see, of course, this offseason, which I loved. You guys drafted Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri, Terry and Arnold, who played in the joint practices, Carlton Davis, y'all traded for. From a defensive perspective, and I will say this, at the end of yesterday's practice, when they brought both teams onto one field, the Lions' red zone defense was pretty damn good. I mean, there wasn't really any turnovers, but the Giants were just not able to do anything against that Lions defense. But for the most part, beforehand, you did have the Detroit Lions defense kind of getting torn up by Malik Neighbors a little bit. How has the defense done so far? Who's played well? Who hasn't? What's your overall perspective?
So first, let me comment back on the whole training camp set up by the Giants. There, same thing for the Lions. We have two congruent fields, right? They're opposite of each other. Same kind of situation, except we can walk around to the other side and see most of it. But yeah, it's kind of weird how they do that. It's like they want the majority of the things they don't want on camera away from us. We're not allowed to have cameras or take pictures or video or anything while we're there anyway. But anyway, who stood out? What did I notice about Malik Neighbors? Am I concerned about it? You know, with the Lions' new cornerback room. Here's the thing about the Lions' red zone defense. It's been pretty tough since last year. You'll see us get cooked, throughout the field, whether it's 20 to 20, 20-yard line to 20-yard line. The Lions defense had a lot of let-ups last year because of the defensive backfield. And then once we, would bear down a little bit inside the red zone, that's when they started to play a little bit tighter. We had a lot of deficiencies in the DB room. We have a very young DB room right now and a couple of, veteran guys and Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson that, this unit has to gel. This was their first opportunity to go against guys that they don't know, that they haven't played against or haven't played against in a while. And it showed, right? I mean, Malik Neighbors was having a day or two. I mean, he was pretty unstoppable from what I've read. And it's a little concerning, but then again, these are all learning moments, right? I mean, these are teaching moments, and a lot of it, I believe, was 7-on-7. I don't know if a lot of 11-on-11 was showing that same sort of deficiency within the Lions defense. But when you ask me, who stood out, there's been quite a few things that have happened this season that were unexpected that also needed to happen. Of course, Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, they're going to stand out, right? I mean, they always do. They're getting plenty of pressure into the backfield. Marcus Davenport has been a shining star so far this season. I mean, as soon as the pads came on, you didn't hear a lot before that, but as soon as the pads came on, this guy just kind of sprung to life. Now, that's another room where Lions fans are divided, like the SOL or, everyone that wants to buy, the expensive defensive end to fix a problem felt like Marcus Davenport was an issue. Whereas I thought it was a great opportunity to bring in a guy that hasn't had a ton of time on the field, but has a body of work. And that's what he's showing, is that he can play and he can play at a high level. He's been really good at setting the edge so far, in these practices, and he's played well. So he's been, one of those guys that we were hoping was going to spring to life. Ennis Rakestraw Jr. This guy just got a major opportunity, albeit because of Mosley's injury yet again. He's torn his pec. He's done for the season. So now Rakestraw, gets another opportunity to maybe get some more first team reps, and he's really shown up. This DB room went from having no interceptions throughout camp to all of a sudden they're getting them in bunches. Now, I don't know how many picks or if they even got any off Daniel Jones during the camp. Do you know? Or even their second or third, tier guys?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not too sure. I know there was a couple of passes batted, but I don't remember in terms of interceptions. I don't think at least Daniel threw any. I could be wrong. So any Giant fan in the chat, or anyone, please check. But I don't think I think there was some batted passes, but I don't think there were any interceptions. Again, I could be wrong because the offense was all the way in the other direction. I couldn't see it, but
Well,
um,
there was definitely the infamous batted ball out of camp, and that was by the guy that I really think is having the best camp for the Lions right now, and that's Levi Onwuzurike. He is one of the only or last picks from the Lions 2021 draft that really hasn't played much or even really been a factor or major force at all. I mean, that 2021 draft class has all been pretty solid. But as a second round pick, he's in his final contract season, right? And he saw some time as a reserve in his rookie year. He missed all of 2022 due to a back injury that he's re-aggravated from his college days. He underwent surgery, and it took him all the way till now. So 2022, 2023, and now in 2024 to finally get going again. And last season, he got 164 snaps in or something like that. So he hasn't had much time, but this is a defining year for Levi. And so far, he's been nothing but disruptive. So disruptive. The infamous batted ball in Giants-Lions practice, Daboll completely lit his ass up, screaming at Levi because he tipped a pass by Daniel Jones and felt that Levi was just breathing a little too close to Daniel Jones on that play. So I'm glad to see Levi getting into the backfield and playing well, but man, Daboll was not happy. Dan Campbell has said, that Levi has been one of the best in camp so far in 2024, and we've seen it. Now I just got to see it transition to a full season, where he's on the field. If he can give us, 40 to 50% of the snaps this season, I think that's a win-win for the team, obviously for Levi to maybe get a second opportunity, or second contract opportunity next season. The biggest thing here is our guard, Zeitler. He even came out and said, I think we're going to have two $20+ million defensive linemen soon. And what he meant by that was Aleem McNeil and Levi O. Now, I don't think he was referring to Levi O is going to get 20 million next year. It's more of the way that he's playing, that he's playing like a guy that's paid, or deserves that kind of money. So if there's somebody to be really excited about, it's Levi. He's battled back from a back injury. He's having a really good camp so far. It just needs to transition to the rest of the season. Of course, Derek Barnes got a bag. Amik Robertson's been playing pretty well. And that's great to see. Meek's 5'9", 5'8" corner. The guy could play inside, outside. He's been probably the most consistent, I think, of the bunch so far, to be honest with you. Even more consistent than Carlton Davis. Arnold, I'm a mixed bag on Arnold right now. I think he's in his rookie growing pains, if you will. He's going to have times where he gets burned, and he's going to make some great plays. The one thing that I will say about Terry and Arnold right now is he's playing pretty good coverage, needs to turn his head around. He's not, he's mirroring pretty well, but he's just not turning around, and the ball is, it's getting where it's got to go. If he can just turn around, man, he's going to get his hands on a lot more balls and probably a lot less flags, because when you don't look back, the laundry comes flying. You know that. So I'd say those are my standouts on defense. Meek Robertson, Derek Barnes, Levi O, the biggest. Ennis Rakestraw is probably my number 2. Davenport, I expected him to be good as long as he stayed healthy. And then, you can't discount what Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil do. Their work ethic is bar none the best on the defense, and it shows.
Yeah, so for some reason, I think this is a StreamYard thing.
Uh-oh.
We see each other in the studio fine, but for some reason, out in the comment section, a lot of people can't see you, and I've tried to refresh my YouTube page to see the stream, and for some reason, it's just a blank box. So I'm going to take you out and bring you back in, and we're going to hope that it does something. So,
okay.
A second. Let's see if that does anything. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, did it do anything, chat? Please let us know, because I don't.
Oh, there we are.
Oh, we're back. Oh, we're good.
We just got to switch sides.
Yep. All right, we're grand. Hopefully.
Now you're Will Rock and I'm Alex.
Okay, and then hopefully StreamYard updates, because there I just switched it around. So hopefully everyone comes back that left and saw. Okay, yeah, what is this going on? But very good, very good.
Well, I hope they could hear me. I hope they. I don't
Yeah,
know
they've been
how.
able to hear you the whole time. It's just a
Okay.
matter of seeing, which again was really, really strange. Um, but moving on to the trenches a little bit, I don't think it was more as day one. I think it was day two where I saw the Giants get to Jared Goff a little bit via the defensive line, and it was it was a couple of different players on the Giants. I will say, from what I saw, Kayvon Thibodeau was stonewalled. So Penei Sewell totally dominated him in on one-on-ones. Um, Honestly, if I because I took video of one-on-ones, I took video of the actual Giants defense against the Lions offense. It was like a different story other than in one particular player, it's Brian Burns, to where the Lions offensive line completely dominated one-on-ones, except for a few players, but that was minimal. And then I go to the 11 on 11s, and it just seemed like the Giants were throwing a couple more things out there, and the Lions were struggling a little bit. Now, I think, to my knowledge, Kevin Zeitler was injured. Um, but before I get into my initial takeaway as far as the defense goes, I do want to ask you. I mean, we've had Kevin Zeitler before, so we know what he's about. Do you think he is an upgrade over Jonah Jackson, who got paid a ton of money over in LA and currently is injured?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that currently he's injured because I think I mean, that'll wrap up. I mean, when I'm done talking about Kevin, I mean, it just all points to injuries with Jonah. Or one of us just disappeared again.
Again? What the
Yeah,
heck?
I'm up, but you're gone now.
Wow.
So I'll keep rolling on Kevin here if you want, or if you want me to wait, I can
Yeah,
wait.
you keep rolling.
All right. So while Jackson obviously offers, more to the Los Angeles Rams, from a long-term perspective, if you will, right? He's going to be there for a minute. He's still young. He's in his second contract. Zeitler has probably been one of the most consistent, steadiest guards in the NFL for a decade now, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's kind of that short-term immediate upgrade over Jonah. And I wholeheartedly believe not only is he an upgrade, but there's going to be another guy that I mentioned that is an upgrade. And I'm glad that he's still around. So the only glaring stat on Zeitler is he's 34 years old. But you're swapping a $6 million guy, 10-year vet, with a $17 million crybaby, in my opinion, in Jonah Jackson. I think he's just a big crybaby. All these ticky-tack injuries last season really pissed off Dan Campbell. You could tell, I'm guessing, but you could kind of tell at the podium, Dan was a little heated at Jonah, making a comment like, well, I guess Jonah's going to let us know when he's ready to play.
Ugh.
So that didn't sit well with a lot of Lions fans. I think a lot of us kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I was one of my projections where he was not going to be back. And I'm glad that he wasn't. I'm glad that, Brad Holmes didn't make that mistake. So the Lions brought in a guy that has an immense amount of experience, right? And he just gets it. You know those people, Alex, right? The people in your life that just kind of seem to get it, right? They get a little bit quicker than others.
Yes.
That's who Kevin is, right? Zeitler is one of those guys. He's a player that can kind of mold and shape his game to the system. If I remember correctly, his wife was having a baby and he was in the hospital doing a workout in the hospital.
Yes.
Waiting for,
I actually remember watching that video.
The guy gets it. So, I mean, he's the grit factor, right? I mean, he's what Detroit wants. That's our model. So he's just a rare breed in today's NFL. He's old school, right? He's old school. But at the same time, he's young enough, wise enough, sharp enough to be in the new school. And you're coached by Hank Fraley, who's old school as they come. And look, he's tough, he's physical, he's aggressive, he's also agile, he's athletic enough to get crafty in this Ben Johnson run game. But Jonah, okay, so Jonah's already hurt, probably broke a fingernail in practice or something, right? I don't know. Way overpaid. I'm glad that Brad Holmes didn't make that type of mistake. Paying way too much for a guy that, the product of being surrounded by all pros, I feel, is why Jonah got paid. So he's the product of being surrounded by a Frank Ragnow, a Taylor Decker, a Penei Sewell, and he kind of lived in their limelight, if you will. But there's one guy, I guess what I'm saying there is Jonah was made to look better than what he really is. In my opinion, maybe not my opinion alone, but we'll see. But let's not forget about the one guy that really makes the difference here for this team, and that would be Graham Glasgow. He is the real upgrade to me over Jonah Jackson. 3-year, $20 million deal. A guy that has played all three positions last year, right guard, left guard, and center. Can play tackle in a pinch. Had a much better season statistically than Jonah Jackson did at his own position when he covered for Jonah. So the dude is tough. Look, he knows the team well. He's very disciplined. He's friends with all the guys. He's part of the team for a long time. Even when he was away, still remained good friends with Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow. He played multiple positions. Even at a moment's notice, he can get in there. Extremely smart football player. So the Lions also went out in the draft to find, some guards of the future, right? But I believe that when you look at Zeitler, when you look at Graham Glasgow, the Lions upgraded twice over Jonah Jackson and spent less than Jonah Jackson's 1-year contract. So big upgrades, guys that can play all over the field. But Zeitler's our right guard. Obviously, Graham's our left. Fully believe that the Lions made the right choice here. And, I know that Zeitler's battling a little injury right now, nothing that's going to hold him out long term. But that's where Graham steps in. So Graham can move all over the place. And I think that he's the real upgrade. And Zeitler's that guy that's going to help us get to the next level in the postseason, assuming that we make it there.
Absolutely. And by the way, shout outs to the Lions fans showing out tonight. I'm a little disappointed in my own Giant fans, but for the ones that are in the chat, Jacob, Mancave, and etc., I've tried to fix this little problem we've had with StreamYard. So I just removed the bottom labels and put in the top labels, though we're not in the color coordinated boxes. It is fine for the moment, most that we can make. So I apologize on behalf of StreamYard. But I kind of find that surprising because I did know about the injury part to an extent with Jonah Jackson, but to where he's complaining about every ache and pain ever, and to where Dan Campbell outed him and said, "Oh yeah, he'll come back when he feels like it's like." There's certain positions, and not in football you have to be tough. That's goes without saying, but you have to have an attitude and a willing to play and a willing to fight for your teammates on that offensive line. And I guess you could say that he's a little lucky that Aaron Donald is not there, because I feel like if Aaron Donald was not retired, he probably would have kicked his ass a little bit. And again, I forget the injury that Jonah Jackson has. I think he's out for the next 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. I think that's what they said. I don't remember the injury, but that comes as a complete shock. But from Zeitler, 2 years here, we cut him because not that he's a bad player, but it was a great, fine job, sarcastic remarks, of course, by our general manager, to where we ended up cutting him. And then we signed Adoree Jackson, then we signed Kenny Galladay, and then all that other nonsense happened. But, he's a very strong guard. I think he's very underrated by the rest of the league. He's a family man, loved being here. And he's reliable. Like that, I could not. Maybe he missed 2 games in a Giants uniform. He was super reliable. So you won't really have the Jonah Jackson tales with Kevin Zeitler.
Yeah, I hope we don't. I hope. I like Kevin, especially when you listen to him in the press conferences. Like, he's just, like I said earlier, he's just a guy that gets it. He just gets it. Immediately gets it, and that's what you're looking forward to when you bring in guys, in the offseason free agency period. You just never know what you're going to get. But when you bring guys in like that can just run with it day one, it's got to make Dan Campbell's job that much easier, where he can take a little bit of a breath and say, okay, we've got one here. We can now focus on this guy, as opposed to this guy. So,
yeah, focus on another position, all that sort of good stuff. But as far as Giant takeaways from camp, as I said, most of day one, it wasn't really recognizable. Day two, though, as I said, the one-on-ones, the Lions O-line was completely dominant. As far as the 11-on-11s go, outside of the red zone drills, I thought the Giants dominated. I thought guys that were competing for jobs like Nacho, Timmy Horn, and Elijah Chapman, and the undrafted free agent from SMU who could also play fullback, I thought they were getting in there. Tibbs was getting in there a little bit. Brian Burns was getting in there. So I think it was a nice test for Detroit's offensive line. I thought Jared Goff did better. I thought he did better things with the football on day 2. There was a couple of bad passes on day 1, and there was the interception to Bobby Okereke. Now, I got to ask you this, because day 2 was really evident of this. I don't think he struggled as much on day 1. What are your thoughts on Hendon Hooker? I personally would have wanted to draft him. I think it was 23, but obviously the Giants used that pick on Jalen Hyatt, and I think even beforehand, you guys ended up taking him. He struggled a little bit from where I was watching him. There was a couple of sailing throws. There wasn't any interceptions, but just not great throws, and I'm a little surprised. But it's him and Nate Sudfeld battling for the backup job. What are your thoughts?
That should not be a battle. Unfortunately it is, but that is the battle that probably worries me the most. I mean, maybe not because you know who the starter is, but there I disappeared again. Gosh forbid, Nate or Jared Goff goes down, we're in trouble. Believe it or not, the craziness is I predicted the Lions to take Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round, way before the draft. And I wanted the guy. I thought that he would have been a top 10, top 5 pick, in the 1st round, had he not been injured. I thought he played that well. But then after you learn a little bit more about the Tennessee offense and how, quirky it was, it's not a great offense to come to the NFL and be an immediate starter or even be a guy that's not going to struggle. Now, he's also coming back from injury. And I think a lot of us forget the fact that you come back from an ACL, you expect guys to bounce back. It's been 12 months. They're going to go out and play. It doesn't work that way. It's a 2-year injury when you really think about it. Same thing for Jameson Williams. It's been a 2-year injury for him. It's going to be a 2-year injury for Hendon Hooker. It's just now we're in that situation where, okay, it's year 2, beginning of year 2 now for Hendon Hooker, and we need him to play. My concerns would be this. If he's not starting to figure it out by the 2nd preseason game, you're not seeing growth. By the 3rd preseason game, he's not fixing some of those mistakes. I would be a little worried. But it's early. He's making a lot of rookie mistakes. You can see it. He's not comfortable right now. But we're also picking apart the worst part of Hendon Hooker. He's done a lot of things that have been actually pretty good. Picking up a very complicated system pretty easily, from understanding the terminology and the mental side of it. Now it's the execution side, which is going to take some time. See, Nate Sudfeld knows this offense. So as long as he is mobile and can come in and throw a pass and command a huddle and command an offense, he's going to make plays look easy when they're not. I don't think that there's any comparison between Hendon Hooker and Nate Sudfeld from a what could be standpoint. Nate is who he's going to be. That's what he's a 3rd string quarterback in the NFL. Hendon has the ability to start someday, but you're talking 3, 4, 5 years down the line where he's finally going to be ready. And I think that's why Brad Holmes brought him in, is they knew that Jared Goff was the guy. We just need someone to potentially limp us through a game or 2 if Jared Goff goes down. I think Hendon can do that. And when you have a running game like we do and an offensive line like we do, it's pretty easy to just to hand the ball off 30 times a game and try to win, and maybe get lucky on a couple of passes or jet sweeps with Jameson Williams. He's got some good guys around him. Hendon needs a little bit of time. I'm not concerned just yet. I am concerned that, he still seems to be making the same mistake on the out route way too often. He's getting picked every time he throws an out route.
Yeah, tough to hear. But I don't want to ignore the chat, despite all the technical issues, but that StreamYard has to figure it out. Can't have an opinion of someone I haven't seen take a snap, reserving the judgment on Hooker. That's a pretty fair point. Jonah Jackson missing 6 weeks is not a shock. It's expected. Stafford should have warned them. Michael says, agree, Rick. He's confident in Colby Sorsdal too. One Pride representing Proud here tonight. I have to agree with that. What's up to Jacob? What's up to Chef? Jonah Jackson's the softest O-line we've seen. And talking on the point of Thibodeau, And Panay Sewell says Panay has been doing that since college. Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to ask about, because there were all sorts of receivers getting the ball yesterday. It wasn't really one consistent one. At least for the second and third teams, there was Caden Davis. There was Isaiah Williams. I think he had a drop, though, on blitz that was coming to whoever was the quarterback. Obviously, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Doris Fontaine, I believe his name
Doris
is
Fountain. Yeah.
Doris Fountain. Obviously, he's coming up big in camp, but there's also another former Giant that is a part of the Lions, and I want to know a little bit more about him because he seems to be, I guess, quiet in the rumors, but again, I'm not in Lion land. That's Khalif Raymond. So, what are your thoughts on Doris and Doris, or I'm probably mispronouncing it, and then Khalif Raymond?
So I think it's Doris too. Just it's Daurice. Some people say Darius. I don't know. I think it's Doris too. Until I hear different. So I'll start with Mr. Fountain here. We'll keep it easy. So Fountain, look, he's a he's a fifth round selection by the Colts in 2018. So he's been around a minute, right? At 6'2", 210-pound receiver, pretty, bigger bodied receiver, somewhat of a replacement size-wise for Josh Reynolds. And my opinion is he's a little bit more physical than Josh is. He plays a little bit more downhill than Josh did. So far, what I've noticed, he's a lot stronger at the catch point. But unfortunately, much of his pro career really has been a major struggle due to injuries early. And I think that's why he is where he is right now in his career. I mean, you don't expect much out of fifth round guys, but hey, we've seen what Amon-Ra St. Brown has been able to do. Not that he was a fifth round guy, but I mean, sometimes you get those diamonds in the rough, right? So, he had some major ankle injuries. So he really just hasn't had a good go of it. He bounced around between the Chiefs, the Packers, and then the Lions picked him up in May of 2023. And I think they kind of seen, the future for this guy. Like, hey, we're going to need some depth. We're going to need some replacement at some point. Let's see what this guy has. And he's kind of stuck around, whether he's been a practice squad guy or whatever. But then you've got this whole thing, like the Tom Kennedy syndrome is what I call it. So every season you get the Tom Kennedy syndrome where, the Tom Kennedy of the Lions, you get a lot of praise for a guy that's making plays and getting a lot of noise. And I'm not saying that, he doesn't have a shot, or that he's going to get cut, but maybe we just need to temper expectations a little bit right now. But I do like what Fountain has put together. And I do like, the way that he's been able to really stand out above the rest. I mean, when you think of guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Traquan Smith, and I mean, Antoine Green is, who he is, our last year's 7th round pick, but he's playing better than those guys right now. And he's getting more looks than those guys right now. And that should be pretty alarming to guys that should be playing at a much higher clip than what Fountain should be technically. But you know what? Every day you wake up, it's a different day. And we're seeing that for Doris Fountain is he's just taking the bull by the horns here and he's not letting it go. I saw him at camp, solid hands. He finds the open crease. He'll sit down, very confident, very comfortable in this system right now. Doesn't matter who's throwing on the ball. He's had some pretty impressive catches. And he's demonstrated a very strong work ethic. Like you see the guy he's one of those guys that just kind of gets it, right? I mean, he's in there putting the work in. He wants to win. The kid wants to win. And I think what we're seeing right now is someone who is hungry. He's on a good team. He knows he's on a good team. He's got great leadership around him. He's excelling in the right opportunity. And like everyone, he just needs to stay healthy. And I think that he'd be a great, 4th, 5th option on this roster. And I think that's where he's headed right now. So for someone who's literally had like 3 targets in the NFL throughout his career, he sure is one hell of a comeback story if it does happen. But I really think that he's kind of that 5th, wide receiver on this roster right now. I expect to see the ball go a lot his way tomorrow in the game. I think he's going to get plenty of targets. If he can pull down, at least 75% of those targets, I think that he'll be well on his way to securing a roster spot. So consistency is what we need now, right? We've seen what he's able to do in practice. Let's see it in the game. Clean up some routes. Know your assignment. But you also ask about Khalif Raymond. But before I get to that, do you want to double back here on Fountain?
Well, I mean, I find it interesting. As I said, I was doing some research on the whole, Lion subject, and Fountain was just the name that kept coming up. Oh, he's making a run at wide receiver 3, and I'm like, wait a minute. I feel like there could be a couple other guys on that roster, talent wise, that could probably succeed him, because I thought coming into this, I mean, I just knew the name Fountain, and then you tell me he's like, oh yeah, he's a former 5th round pick of the Colts. I'm like, wow, this guy's been around longer than I thought. And then, looking at guys like Traquan Smith, who came in from, I think he was with New Orleans for the longest time, not outplaying a guy like him. I mean, I just find it a little surprising. But what's to know about Khalif Raymond?
Yeah, so I mean, Khalif is Khalif. A few weeks ago, any of my Lions people will attest to this. They know that I said don't be surprised if Khalif Raymond doesn't make this roster. And the reason why I said that was because I seen a lot of the taller wide receivers getting a little bit more opportunity here, and I'm wondering, are we going to go that direction? And I think the answer is absolutely not now. After what I've seen out of Khalif Raymond, he has always been someone that could be trusted by Jared Goff. Doesn't matter, what the down is, what the route is. Khalif can run it. He can do it. He's quick. I mean, he's quick. I mean, he's like 4.35 type speed, I believe. He can return punts. He can return kicks. He's always been a guy, to get his nose in there and do the dirty work. And he's always been a guy that can be trusted, just kind of like, Josh Reynolds was with Jared Goff. Khalif Raymond kind of fits that mold too. If it's 3rd and long, sometimes you'll see Khalif Raymond go on a 17-yard route and he gets it and he makes the play. So he's been very dependable, but he's a glue guy. He's a guy that fits our locker room. He fits the mentality. He's a hell of a ball player. The size wise just kind of turned me off, but you know what? It's not always about the size of the dog, right? It's about the fight in the dog. So Khalif is a fighter, and I think that he's going to find his way as the number 3, no less than the number 4 on this roster. But I think that's going to be a battle between Fountain and Khalif Raymond right now, unless DPJ and Traquan Smith and Isaiah Williams and Caden Davis are going to start to show up, because right now, below that 4th spot, I mean, Antoine Green, I think I got some notes on this somewhere, but below that 4th spot, I mean, it's kind of like wide open. No one's really separating themselves right now. And I'm just as surprised as what you just said, with Traquan Smith and DPJ not outperforming Darius Fountain. I'm very surprised that it's just kind of stagnant at the bottom of the wide receiver tree. Has me a little bit concerned. Like, are we going to keep 5 or 6? Do we have to keep 6 because we don't really feel confident about 5? And if we do that, what does that do to another position? So there's a lot left to wonder here in the wide receiver room. I guess at the end of the day, though, between Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams, and then Gibbs out of the backfield, I don't see a lot of balls going to a 5th guy this year. A few 100 yards, maybe, 20, 30 balls. I think that's about it for your 5th guy.
Yeah, definitely. Rick says, if Khalif was 4 inches taller, he wouldn't have to ask that question. Dude is so underrated.
No, he's full of heart, man. Full of heart.
Yeah, definitely taking notice that while I was doing some research and just remembering a little bit when he was on the Giants. I know this is a general outsider question because it really doesn't have to do with roster bubbles and roster bubble battles and stuff like that. After a monster extension, do you think that Jared Goff is the right man for the job as the future / right now quarterback of the Detroit Lions?
1,000%. I've been a Jared Goff, not just a fan, but a supporter. When everyone called him a bridge quarterback, I mean, it's out there. The tape's out there. I've never felt that way. I felt that he came into a bad team in 2021. He didn't have any weapons at all. It was a team that just decimated its roster, and the entire team was gutted, down to the mud. You say you take, buildings down to the studs. Well, the Lions went one further. They went all the way down past the foundation, and they rebuilt this entire organization. And that started with the roster that they axed 80% of the roster from 2020 to 2021. Not many teams have ever done that. So now you have a quarterback that's coming in that had a coach that completely, screwed them all up in the media, Sean McVay saying the things that he said, ruining this kid's, mentality, right? His confidence, it wasn't Jared Goff. It really wasn't. But he came into a bad team and you didn't have really any receivers that first year that were healthy. And then when he finally started to see what was in Amon-Ra St. Brown, that connection started to build. And then in 2022, the team finally clicked like week 8. And ever since week 8, you saw who Jared Goff was. You could call him a systems quarterback if you want. You can say that he needs great offensive line and a bunch of weapons. Tell me a team that doesn't. Tell me a quarterback that doesn't need a great offensive line, especially to run the ball. Tell me a team that doesn't need at least 1 or 2 weapons on the offense to be successful, because there's not one team in the history of the NFL that hasn't had at least that won games. So everyone can tell me all these different things about Jared Goff. And what I'll tell you is the guy is consistent. He protects the ball. He's extremely smart. Yes, he plays in a system that works for him. But isn't that the whole point of the game? Like, don't you want to design a playbook that works for you, not against you? So play to your strengths. That's just smart football. The contract is now not that big compared to Jordan Love and, some of these other guys. And when you look at how it's outfitted over the next few seasons, it's really not that crazy, especially when you look at, where the, cap increases are going to hit right in line with, his contract. So, look, the Lions spent like $700+ million or whatever it is this season. They're ready to go all in for the next few years, and they're going to continue to build for the next 10. I firmly believe that Jared Goff is going to lead this team to a Super Bowl, and it could potentially be this year. So to answer your question, my final answer is yes. Jared Goff is the man of the future, at least for the next few seasons. Now, beyond that, I don't know. We'll see.
Got a lot of yes and absolutelys from the chat. Goff got his mojo back here in Detroit. Without a doubt, Goff is the perfect QB for the Lions. Jared Goff fed me the tastiest crow I've ever had, and I loved every single bite. A good way to change culture, replace everything. What up, fellas, from the disgruntled taco, who is a Raiders fan.
So Alex, let me ask you a quick question here, because all right, so again, I'm on record. I was a bigger fan of Kayvon Thibodeau versus Aiden Hutchinson. Now, people are going to burn me on the stake for this. I felt that Thibodeau's ceiling was going to be much higher than Aiden. So now when you look back at that draft and what these two players have done, what is your overall thought on Thibodeau versus the Aiden Hutchinson drama and talk? And I mean, how excited are you to have the defensive line that you have this year with Thibodeau and Burns?
Oh, I love the question. So I definitely viewed Aiden Hutchinson as a much better player. I think, what was it in that draft? He was probably he should have been the first one off the board, not Trayvon Walker. Even though Walker, I think he got almost 10 sacks or over last year for the Jacksonville. But I always viewed Hutchinson as the better edge rusher. I still do, even though the two of them got the same amount of sacks last year. Thibodeau's biggest weakness, speaking in his game last year and the last 2 years, because it's a totally different system that the New York Giants are running this year. Wink Martindale, I loved him as a defensive coordinator. I know there was some inefficiencies and some, shit that he did wrong on the defensive side of the ball. And then there was that big argument between him and Dable. But what he did for Kayvon, in my opinion, and I don't know if you've ever heard the narrative around Wink, is that, edge rushers never get 10 or more sacks in Wink's system. Like Matt Judon already had 9.5, and this guy had this, and Calais Campbell didn't get to 10. But you saw Kayvon get to the 11.5 mark under Wink, and that, in my opinion, and there's a couple other content creators across the NFL that would agree with my sentiment, including Brett Coleman, that Kayvon, while he got 11.5 sacks last year, he's a guy that didn't win consistently off the edge and was a a beneficiary of being unblocked or blocked by a tight end, and didn't go against some starting level talent. Most of the time, it was backup level talent, Mekhi Becton, Max Mitchell, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with that, I will say, you go up you go up against who you go up with. You're not picking offensive tackles. Oh, I want to go up against this guy. You're not doing that. So I think in this system, I hate that they're going to put these pass rushers in coverage like they did the last system. But as far as Thibodeau goes, he's going to have to face some more one-on-one matchups with tackles. That's why I was a little disappointed that he didn't win the matchups against Penei Sewell. And then he switched over to Decker's side in the 11-on-11s, and you saw more wins there. So I think his biggest problem is actually just, winning consistent matchups and not just using speed. And then as far as this defensive line goes, and, seeing it all this year, I think the biggest weakness is that second spot next to Dexter Lawrence, because the Giants need some guys that can gash the run. That was a big problem on the second day, is that they were getting gashed a little bit. Hopefully Bobby O and a couple other guys can help that. But I think this defensive line could do some real wreckage. And the way I really look at that is because, it's not just in practice or whatever. I like the Lions as a team. They're not my favorite team, but I admire them as an organization because they rebuilt the right way. And now they could have a top defense in the league. Not to mention, with all the front four and the Giants have and all this cooking stuff that they're doing with different defensive linemen, you penetrate and get to Jared Goff through a arguably top 5 offensive line in the NFL. I consider that a good accomplishment. Now, show it to me 18 weeks during the season, we'll have a conversation, but I think that this D-line can do wonders. I'm also very worried about the second corner spot because the Giants failed to address that, and we saw that when Jameson Williams was pretty much the star of the show on day number 1.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm going to follow up with that is I wanted to know, because you were there, and I know you've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but how well did our offensive line do against your starting defensive line? I totally forgot about Dexter Lawrence. I mean, that's a trio of craziness right there. Lawrence and Thibodeau and Burr. I mean, come on. And Kirky, or however you say his name. Look, that's not a bad defensive front seven, right? So how well did our offensive line really hold up? Was it kind of win some, lose some, or was it more one-sided, do you feel?
I think starting from the defense overall, I think the Lions offense won on day one. I think the rush wasn't there as much. You didn't have as many would-be sacks. And the problem I have with the Giants is I don't know how it was arranged in this practice. I don't know what it's like in the Lions camp, but with the Giants camp is that they don't blow sacks dead till it's dead, which pisses me off because quarterbacks take a lot of sacks due to that. They think they have extra time in the play and then they get tackled. But day one was the better day, I'd say, for the Lions offense overall and the Lions blocking too. Now, I will say, as pass blocking, they weren't great on day number 2 in the regular drills, but they were a very good run blocking unit because there were times you'd see Jamar Jefferson or mainly Jahmyr Gibbs get out and have a nice little run. And of course, you take a pinch of salt and put that into the argument because these guys can't tackle. But knowing the running back Jahmyr Gibbs is, I would still say that the Lions run blocking definitely did well on day 2.
That's good to hear. I'm only thinking that it can be better this year. If they happen to do camp again next year, I would love to get out there. But so anyway, I didn't mean to derail you there. I just had to get those 2 questions in because I'm curious, how the Lions offensive line is really doing, and obviously I wasn't there to see it. So
yeah. But 2 final notes to end off of, and then I'll send you on your way. We already talked about the wide receiver position, the back end. What are some other key position battles going on in Lions camp?
Yeah, so there's a few. I kind of have this thing that I do called like bubble watch, break-ins and breakouts, and I guess when you start with the running back room, let me pull some of my notes in here. So when you start with the running back room, you've got Craig Reynolds kind of versus Sione Vaki, and I can't imagine the Lions not retaining a third round pick in the same year. That just doesn't happen. So when I look at what the Lions, normally do, they kept 3 running backs last year. I think they kept 4 the year before. Does this mean that we're potentially going to keep 4 this season? So if they keep 3, like they did last season, I think the one thing that throws a wrench into this is the new kickoff rule, because you're looking for faster guys, right, to get down on special teams, the guys that, are willing to tackle. Craig Reynolds is one of those guys. Sione Vaki is a safety playing running back. So both of those guys are going to be premier special teams aces, I believe, in this new kickoff format. Now, I have not seen either of them line up yet in the new kickoff rule because I didn't pay attention when I was at camp. I was looking at other things. But that leads me to believe that maybe there's not so much of a battle here for the 3rd and the 4th as there is. I guess I disappeared again. As there is potentially, really the 4th and the 5th. And that, what I mean by that is we're not going to keep 5, but does that mean that, Craig Reynolds really has a battle with Jamar Jefferson? Because Jamar's been looking pretty good, and Dan has really been high on him. So Knight, look, I like Zonovan big time. I love what he brings. He's just going to end up being a camp guy that's probably going to make the practice squad, hopefully. I'd love to see both Knight and Jefferson potentially make the practice squad. So maybe the Lions keep 4, but if they don't, this is a wild battle between Vaki and Reynolds. I can't see the Lions not keeping that 3rd round pick. We did talk about the wide receiver room. I'll glorify it again real quick. I think that there's a lock with Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams and Khalif Raymond now. Last season, the Lions kept 5. And after Darius Fountain, which should be our 4th or 5th wide receiver, like I said, the battle's wide open. No one really seems to be separating themselves from the pack here. I think it's a close battle for, Fountain and Antoine Green for that 4th spot versus maybe there's an extra spot open if they decided to keep 6 for some unknown reason. Then you've got Caden Davis and Isaiah Williams battling out with DPJ and Traquan Smith. And that's kind of a weird battle to me. It's doesn't make any sense because DPJ should be clowning all over these guys. And he just has not risen above this year yet. Now, last year is playing well. We just thought he needed an extra year with Jared Goff, and that doesn't seem like it's really taken hold. I'd say the other battle here on the offensive side of the ball is tight end. I can see where the Lions are only going to keep 3. And I think for that reason, James Mitchell, our 5th round pick from 2 seasons ago, I think he's on the way out. I think that Shane Zielstra is putting together a really good camp, coming back off a nasty injury from last season. And I think it's going to be Shane Zielstra, Laporta, and Brock Wright, obviously heading to the 53-man roster. But if the Lions were to keep a 4th tight end, then that battle really is between Mitchell and Parker Heath, who Parker Heath has actually been playing pretty well. So it's kind of interesting. It really depends on where, you see the roster shaking up. Are the Lions going to follow suit from what they did, last year? Then, yeah, there's some pretty unique battles. If I were to look at the Lions' unofficial depth chart on the defensive side of the ball, I think that our edge position offers a lot more interesting battles here. So John Kaminsky obviously is gone for at least the 5-6 months with an injury, which I think is now promoted a couple of guys to potentially make this roster. At least one more guy like Mitchell Agood and Matthew Betts. I think that's a great camp battle to be watching out for. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport are your 1-2. If you label James Houston an edge, then you got James Houston and Josh Paschal. But we can't forget about, Mekhi Wingo can also play on the outside. So there's some interesting things going on here for the Lions this season that really make them not only unique, but deep on this defensive line and the defensive front overall. But I think this Mitchell Agood and Matthew Betts is going to be a fun camp battle to watch. Preseason is going to tell us a lot. Can Matthew Betts, a Canadian football player, break back into the NFL and actually make a roster? We don't know. But from what I saw in camp, the dude was all over the place. He was in the back of the field consistently. They were blowing it dead pretty quickly. And if he was doing that against our guys, what is he going to be able to do, tomorrow night in the preseason game against the Giants? That's what I'm looking for as my two bets. Really, this defensive edge position overall, I think, is the position to watch. And then cornerback on defense. Ennis Rakestraw. He has come from being a second round pick to not getting much action to now he's been thrust into the thick of it. And he's somebody that can really make his presence known and could potentially earn a rotational starting spot throughout this preseason. So it'll be fun to watch. Kendall Vildor, man, he's got to step up. And Cleo Dorsey has been making a lot of plays just like he did last year. There's just so much going on here, man. It's a good position to be in. How about you? Who's your number one for the Giants? What positional group?
Ooh, okay, all right. Corner two. That's between Nick McLeod and Cordell Flott. I personally am I'm endorsing Nick McLeod, though respectfully, that corner two should not even be on the roster. It should be somebody like Ahkello Witherspoon. But I've mentioned my grievances with that position before. I will also say two things. Vildor and Dorsey, funny enough that they're battling, they were also involved in day two fights. I don't know if you heard that part.
Yep.
Dorsey is actually a former Giant, but not like regular season Giant, more like camp body. And I was actually rooting for him to make the roster a few seasons ago. Defensive tackle, number 2, next to Dexter Lawrence. Right now, I think Nacho's going to get that role because he plays the run at least at a decent level. Let's see what else. Swing tackle. It's between Josh Azudu, Joshua Miles, who obviously will both start on the first team offensive line tomorrow night. Running back, a little bit interesting, more than it should be, between Eric Gray and Dante Miller, who has a really, really good story of how, he wasn't eligible and, what his life upbringing was. Back end wide receivers will be interesting, kind of like you guys, because we got Allen Robinson. We got 2 guys in Isaiah McKenzie and Gunnar Olszewski who are looking to get a wide receiver / returner role. You got tight end, and this is a lot of positions. You got tight end behind Daniel Bellinger and Theo Johnson, either Chris Mannertz, Jack Stoll, or Tyree Jackson, or maybe even Lawrence Cager. And I think that's it. No batter for kicker, even though we got the Irish guy. But those are pretty much every single battle going on with the Giants. And by the way, what's up to Brad Holmes, Bulge, Eric in the chat, and everybody else who has popped in?
So I disappear. I keep disappearing, but I've never had that issue with StreamYard. I'm wondering what's going on with StreamYard, man. That's
I've been using StreamYard for what? Almost 4 years, and this is the first time it's ever happened to me. So
yeah, I switched to OBS. I had enough of all the stream browser things. They're so dependent upon their servers,
Yeah, it's dependent on their servers, and StreamYard has limitations. So
yeah, I first started with StreamYard. It actually worked out pretty well in the very beginning, but now I've tried to learn new things. So tomorrow night, man, it's going to be a great game. Are you going to be doing any sort of a live during the game, or what do you guys do?
I will probably just be watching it by myself because, I have this stigma. Every time we stream a Giants game on here, they lose. Now, of course, it's preseason. But we streamed the Bucks game Monday night, and Daniel Jones was horrible. Streamed the Seahawks game Monday night. Daniel Jones was horrible. Streamed the Jets game last year. Both Jets games awful. So it's just not great there. But one thing I will say before we let you leave, and by the way, everybody subscribe, do all the good stuff to this channel. Of course, Will's Rocked On podcast. What are some players? And I know obviously we just went over roster bubble battles and certain position battles. What players, maybe name as many as you want, but I usually give about 5 or more, that you and Lions fans should look out for tomorrow night?
Well, I think, we're not going to see a whole lot of starters. So clearly, number one is wide receiver position, Darius Fountain. Like he's the one that's capturing, everybody's hearts right now. So we need to see it on film. We know that Tom Kennedy is probably going to do something tomorrow night. He always does. But I still feel like it's a player that's just not going to make this team. On the offensive line, we need to see, where Coyote Awosika still is. He coming off the NFC Championship game, he got a little bit of work in. He played pretty well. But with the injuries, obviously, to our offensive line and this mystery illness to our Christian Mahogany draft pick this year, kind of worrisome. So we need to see Coyote Awosika step up tomorrow night. Kobe Sorsdahl, and you got to stick him with the offensive line. Again, he's another guy that's been slow to progress. So obviously Lions fans need to, watch the offensive line with intent tomorrow night. See what these guys are doing. Let's make sure, we feel comfortable, right? We got to feel comfortable. So we can tell Brad Holmes, that he can feel comfortable when he selects these guys at the end of the August. But Antoine Green is another one, man. Another wide receiver that has to show up, being a 7th round pick last year. We need to see more out of him. The thing that has always been said about Antoine Green is that when he plays fast, he's tough to stop, but he's too much in his head, right? He's thinking too much. I'm hoping he's not thinking as much this year and the game is really slowed down. And he understands the concepts a little bit better, and we can see him play fast because he's another guy that has, elite speed for as big as he is. Has elite speed. So defensive side of the ball, look, Josh Pascal, it's time for him to, or get off the pot. I really got to see this guy do something this year. Levi, we need to make sure he, crawls out of this game healthy, but I want to see that he's able, to do it this year and finally show us those glimpses of his rookie year all over again. But the guy that I really want to see perform on this defensive line tomorrow is Mekhi Wingo. This guy is so intriguing to me. The fact that he slipped so far in the draft, and he shouldn't have. This guy is an inside-outside monster. He's got that Aaron Donald type size and speed and athleticism. He's not Aaron Donald by any means, but he can be a very unique weapon inside this defense because you just don't know where he's going to come from. So that one's going to be fun to watch. But I think the one that everyone is most worried about is Broderick Martin, the quote unquote reach by Brad Holmes, back up into the 3rd round last season, had all of 14 snaps last year, body transformation this offseason, looking good. Haven't heard much about him all offseason or training camp. Only can go off of what I've seen in camp the one day that I was there this year so far. Looked good. So I want to see that tomorrow. Really, other than that, the cornerbacks. I mean, we know a lot of these guys. We're not going to see a whole lot of the guys that, we want to see. So, it's the Khalil Dorseys. It's the Stephen Gilmores. It's, bringing CJ Moore back. Can these guys step onto the field and have an impact? Now it's, it's 2-on-2s or 2s-on-3s, and it's not always that exciting. But this is going to be a grinded out kind of game. So what do you got for a score? Do you think there's going to be a high score or low score game?
I think a reasonably low score. I have a feeling. I mean, DeVito's not a huge deep passer. I think the Giants will try 1-2 shots down the field with Drew Lock because he does have an arm. I think it's going to be like ground, and because I mean, you were talking about some guys in the back end of the O line room like Awosika and Kobe Sorsdahl. For the Giants, they have their own battles in terms of guard and backup center. So I think it's going to be low scoring like last year. I can't remember the score last year, but it was pretty low. It's pretty low.
Well, I'm excited, man. Football's back. That's the most important thing. It's back. The season has begun for the people like us to do videos and create content. It's a grind and it just doesn't stop. So it's good to be back, man. Appreciate you having me on tonight.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate all the Lions fans showing up.
Yeah, that you guys outdid Giant fans, and not to piss on Giant fans, but come on, man. What's up
I
to
got to
Sock
tell you
Sharing
this,
Film in
though.
the chat?
I
Sure.
got to say one more thing. Malik Neighbors, like this kid, you guys might have caught lightning in a bottle with this guy. Like, he is the real deal. He does remind me a lot of the Odell Beckham splashy, great hands, run every route, fast. I mean, the guy's got the goods. The only concern that I obviously have is temper. Can he control those emotions? That random elbow forearm to the face of Khalil Dorsey, or was it Kirby? Or I think it was Kirby.
Kirby Joseph.
It was like, wow, like that's the kind of stuff that's going to cost you 15 in a game, and an ejection potentially. So I hope it doesn't come back to bite you guys, because we want to see guys like that play in the game and play at a high level, and do what they're here to do, man. I think the kid's going to be fun to watch.
Of course. So I'm going to do a little wrap up at the end with the Giants depth chart and some bubble players. But first, I would like to thank Will for coming on tonight. I don't know, again, what the hell happened with StreamYard. I've been using this for years, and it's like, oh, I'm gone, then Will's gone, then everybody's, in mixed positions. Go subscribe to Rockthon Podcast. Follow him on Twitter. That stuff is in the description. Will, it was a pleasure talking to you, and we shall see what comes of tomorrow night.
All right, buddy. I appreciate you having me on, Alex. Go One Pride. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Lions versus the Giants. Take care, man.
Appreciate you, Will. All right. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up for Giant fans here. And if you're a Lions fan, you want to stay, I appreciate you. But if you are leaving, definitely hit the like button, subscribe. Appreciate Lions pride coming out. Again, I didn't expect that much. So some just minor stuff to recap for the New York Football Giants as camp has gone on. I want to go talk about the depth chart first, and then we'll talk about some camp takeaways, and then we'll talk about bubble players, and then we'll be out of here. Trust me, it was pretty extensive. So as far as the depth chart goes, if you guys have not seen it already, there's a few interesting tidbits. Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton are smacked into one position on the wide receiver depth chart alongside Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors. So those two are still fighting for it. And I said it, and a lot of people ripped me for it back in April, May. I said, these two guys are codependent on each other's success. If Hyatt does his thing during the season, he develops, he's catching passes from Daniel Jones or whoever's the quarterback, then Slayton is going to get traded at the midseason deadline. If Jalen Hyatt's not doing his thing, if he's not getting snaps, if he is still having trouble in and out of breaks and with the release, guess what? Darius Slayton is here to stay for longer than most people anticipate. So that is that. That's at least for the wide receiver position. I'm surprised Gunnar Olszewski's not with the second team. Miles Boykin is listed as one of the second team wide receivers. Allen Robinson is actually a third team wideout, so that's a little interesting. They have updated this since Deshaun Corbin was put on the IR. Tommy DeVito, QB3, QB2, Drew Lock, QB1, Daniel Jones. Interesting enough, Greg Van Roten is the second right guard. He's probably not going to play right guard tomorrow. I don't know if he will play tomorrow. I think he should, because at the end of the day, the Giants do have two backup centers in Austin Schloedman and Jimmy Morrissey, but Van Roten for some reason is playing center. So why don't you have him get some game action at center? You don't know if John Michael Schmitz is going to come back against the Texans or not. So get him some game action at center. Prove to me that he plays center. And if not, shit, or get off the pot. As far as the tight end position goes, not a surprise to see Jack Stoll and Tyree Jackson towards the end, getting the latter end of the stick. Interesting to see Lawrence Cager as the second tight end. I thought Theo Johnson would do that, but I guess they're kind of, mixing him in. Mannertz at third tight end doesn't surprise me, because he's been blocking his ass off throughout the entire camp. He was brought in to be a very, very good run blocker. And Cager, he's been here and there, so I can't really, fault him for that, but he is, of course, going to do his thing. Great show, Alex. Thank you for having us, Lions fans. No problem. Look, even if you're a Lions fan and you're just here for football, that's why I welcome all fans, not just Giant fans, because that would be irresponsible of myself. Move this camera around. It'd be irresponsible of myself to say only Giant fans, nobody else. I appreciate the entrance from the other fan bases. Did Eric Gray get a concussion? Will miss tomorrow's game. Pretty sure I heard that on I forgot what podcast. Thanks. That's a good question. I think he was just, I forget who hit him really hard, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play. It was Morris Norris. That's who it was. It was Morris Norris. He gave a pretty big hit stick to Eric Gray. Gray is fine. He should play, I think. Again, I could be wrong. He should play in tomorrow's game. As far as the defense goes, Nacho playing the defensive tackle spot next to Dex doesn't surprise me. Boogie Basham, he's been the fourth edge in camp, doesn't surprise me. Jordan Riley and Ryder Anderson are the two lead guys behind Nacho and Dex. That doesn't surprise me. And I'm just pointing out main key positions for roster battles, not positions we already know what's going to happen. Jordan Phillips hasn't done much this camp. Neither has DJ Davidson. But Timmy Horn and Elijah Chapman, in my opinion, should jump them because Timmy Horn has put on a nice camp. Elijah Chapman has made a shit ton of plays. So I think they should jump Phillips and Davidson. As far as the linebacker spots go, it's not surprising to see Deontay Johnson next to Carter Coughlin because Johnson has had a hell of a camp. As far as the secondary goes, McLeod is the second slot corner rather than a backup outside, which bothers me a little bit, but hopefully he plays tomorrow, get some reps against these backup Lions receivers, and, he's alongside Cordell Flott. He's actually the third nickel. Isaiah Simmons is the second, and Trey Herndon is also in there, who is vying for a roster spot. And no real anything with the safeties as far as Isaiah McKenzie and Gunnar Olszewski go in the punt return spots. Gunnar Olszewski leads both kick and punt return. Wouldn't be surprised to see Ira Sante get some reps as well. Moving over to the camp notes. And I can mix this in with the final thoughts because we've been going an hour and a half strong almost. We talked about Greg Van Roen. We talked about Malik Neighbors. I want to see Jake Kubas and Josh Miles stand out tomorrow because we heard Will talk about some of the defensive linemen that have been playing really well, guys that are vying for spots, guys that need a big step. I don't know if Levi is going to play tomorrow, but a guy like Mekhi Wingo and another guy alongside him, Broderick Martin, who really needs to step up because he only got a number of snaps last year. I want to see Jake Kubas really do well against those guys because we've given Jake Kubas credit in the running game in camp. We've given Jake Kubas credit in one-on-ones versus guys like Nacho, but I really want him to sit there and play really well against guys who could possibly be bona fide interior rushers in this league or even backups because that's how you're going to make your bread. And the Giants haven't had quality depth on the offensive line in a long time. They haven't had quality depth on the practice squad in a long time. They haven't had quality on undrafted free agents probably since 2022. And Jake Kubas is really making an impression on me. Now, as for Joshua Miles, if you're looking at the Lions depth chart, he's going to go up against a guy like Josh Paschal and James Houston. Houston, I think he's a solid rusher. Again, Lions fans, if you got any thoughts on James Houston, send him over. So that's as far as that goes. Josh Paschal, again, I think he was injured last year, which kind of left Aiden Hutchinson on an island. So I'm really looking for Joshua Miles to stand out against those guys. I know he kind of got tortured a little bit in training camp towards the end in the joint practices. Gunnar Olszewski, Isaiah McKenzie. Olszewski's great with the speed. We saw him on day 2 get some slants from Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. This guy's got speed as a wide receiver. Now, he probably not in the regular season. You'd want to use Isaiah McKenzie more against quality corners. But McKenzie, he is versatile. You can line him up in the backfield. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up on the outside. You could do more with McKenzie, but is he going to give you the same return status as Gunnar Olszewski? Now, I would like to see Nacho and Ryder Anderson do their thing. I want to see Nacho do well in gaps playing the run when they're running it tomorrow, with Jamar Jefferson or Craig Reynolds or any of the other backups they have. Jake Funk is another one. I want to see him stop the run, and I want to see Ryder Anderson create an interior pass rush because he did well against Giants offensive linemen, interior specifically. But I want to see him do better against the Lions because the 2 days that I saw, Ryder Anderson really was not getting there as much. I want to see Deontay Johnson. I want to see him stand out because he had a large number of tackles in the Lions game last year, but pretty much faded away and went onto the practice squad. Try to vie for that linebacker 3 role. Simmons is pretty much, if you guys know the term in baseball, utility player. That's Isaiah Simmons. So you're not listing him at one position. And I think there's another position in football that Arthur Smith coined the term for Cordell Patterson. I don't know what it is, but that's Deontay Johnson. That's Isaiah Simmons. Deontay Johnson's a regular linebacker, and he's a special teamer, and he fits this system. So I'd like to see him stand out. But to finally wrap it up, to cup it with bubble players I want to watch, I already went over Miles. I already went over Jake Kubis. I already went over Ryder Anderson. So that's taken care of. I went over Deontay Johnson. I do want to see Dante Miller because he's had nice burst in camp. I'd like to get him more receiving reps rather than running reps because we know the burst he can have. I want to get him more receiving reps and see what he could do because if he could burst really well in these games and if he can go out there and beat Eric Gray for that running back 3 spot, that's going to be big, meaning the Giants caught a big fish with Dante Miller, but they also failed on the draft pick of Eric Gray. Just putting it out there. Ahira Sante and John Giles. These guys haven't gotten a lot of burn in camp. I expect them to be with Tommy DeVito. These guys will be on specials, so they'll have pivotal roles there. Asante hasn't done a good job as a punt returner in practice. He's dropping a lot. But both guys are vertical threats that go one-on-one. So Kenny Galladay-esque. The next few guys, Josh Azudu and Jimmy Morrissey. Morrissey and Schlodman, that's probably one of the main battles at center. Love to see what Morrissey has. Love to see what Schlodman has because Morrissey is more of a back end of the roster practice squad guy. Schlodman is actually a backup center. He was doing it with the Vikings for so many years. Actually started, I don't think he started the playoff game. I think he started the one game against the Giants where the Giants lost on a field goal by Greg Joseph. But I like to see what Morrissey puts on as a competition. I want to see what Josh Azudu does. I've seen pretty much already, but I need to complete my narrative that says Josh Azudu is not a good swing tackle. That's where a guy like Joshua Miles can step up. I want to see Elijah Chapman make more plays. I think he's done really well in camp. He's got short size. He could definitely make do as a pass rusher and penetrate gaps, but again, he's got some size issues, which will prohibit him from being a great player in the NFL or possibly a good player. Just need a quality backup. Jordan Phillips hasn't done anything in camp, not even versus, top tier offensive line. I think he had one good rep versus Runyon, and that's it. He's a guy that's been a veteran across the league, the Bills, the Dolphins, the Cardinals. He has not shown up yet, and he may not even make the roster, let's be honest. So he's another guy. And then as far as the secondary players, and I'll end it off on that because I know it's been a long show. As far as the secondary players, Mario Goodrich III came over from the Eagles, flourishes in a zone-esque system. Would love to see what he does. Probably playing with the second and third squads. Alex Johnson, guy who could play safety, guy who could play corner. He's a guy I'm massively looking for to contribute, kind of to be a camp body and also a preseason star. Trey Herndon, I want to see what he does because he's kind of in that same role as Jordan Phillips, a guy who's a respected veteran, who has a ton of experience, but hasn't shown much in camp other than a few PBUs, and mostly Nick McLeod and Cordell Flott. That battle for that corner 2 spot, hopefully they do the proper thing and they put Flott on one side, McLeod on the other, and just let them battle it out that way. But ladies and gentlemen, it's almost been an hour and a half. Like, comment, subscribe. Who did I just have an emoji fight with? I have no idea, Socks. But apologies in advance for the issues with StreamYard. That was weird. That was weird tonight where, Will was out 1 minute, I was out another. So that's never happened to me. Thank you so much to the Lions faithful that came out tonight. You guys flooded the chat. You guys were awesome. Thank you to the Giant fans who flooded the chat tonight. You guys were awesome. Thank you to Will for coming on and sharing this out. Lovely conversation. Loved having him on. If the Giants ever play the Lions again, I will reach out to him. Appreciate you guys. This will be on the podcast platforms probably within an hour and a half. Like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Do all the good stuff, folks. We got more content coming your way. Appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you guys later.